Picture the scene precisely. It's evening. The lamps are on. The rest of the room is soft and ordinary. A cushion slightly crooked, a half-filled glass of water, the low murmur of something on in the background. And there she is. Your cat sitting upright near the baseboard, her back to you, facing a stretch of wall that has nothing on it. Not a picture, not a mark, not a shadow, just paint and plaster. She hasn't moved in 4 minutes. Her tail is still. Her ears are angled, not flat, not alarmed, just tilted, the way they get when something has her full and undivided attention. You watch her for a moment. Then you look at the wall. There's nothing there. And somehow that makes it stranger. Most of us have a small rotating collection of explanations for this. She hears something, a mouse in the walls, pipes settling, the neighbor's TV coming through the shared partition. Or if you've spent any time in the corners of the internet that cats seem to quietly rule, you've encountered the more colorful theory. She sees something you can't. A ghost, a spirit, an energy left behind by whoever lived here before. That explanation gets more traction than it probably deserves because it does something the sensory answer doesn't. It honors the feeling that your cat is perceiving something genuinely real, genuinely present, genuinely beyond the reach of human understanding. And in a way, that instinct isn't wrong at all. It's just pointed at the wrong kind of mystery. The hearing explanation is the one that tends to satisfy people longest. It's scientific sounding, it's not alarming, and it's technically accurate. Cats do hear things we can't. But here's where that answer starts to feel thin. Saying your cat stares at the wall because she hears better than you is a little like a painter creates art because she has hands. It names a tool. It doesn't touch the experience. It doesn't explain the quality of that stillness, the specific posture, the focused intensity that makes this behavior feel so different from ordinary cat behavior. There's a texture to a wall stare that the hearing explanation skims right past. And that texture is what this is actually about. Here's the first thing worth sitting with. Your cat doesn't experience the world the way you do. Not just in degree, not just sharper hearing or a keener nose, but in kind. The way she processes sensory information, the way her brain builds a picture of the room she's in, the way she navigates space and time and attention. It is genuinely, profoundly different from your experience of the same room. You and your cat can sit in identical physical space and inhabit what are, in a real sense, two entirely separate environments. That's not a poetic exaggeration. It's the beginning of actually understanding what you're watching when she stares at that wall. Feline behaviorists sometimes describe a cat's sensory world as a kind of living architecture, an environment that is continuously built and rebuilt from sound, scent, vibration, and light in ways that have no human equivalent. Where you see a wall, your cat may be reading something more like a manuscript, not metaphorically. The surface that looks blank and static to you is, within her perceptual framework, layered with information that arrives in real time, constantly updated, and processed with a level of precision that her body is specifically designed to handle. The wall stare isn't her tuning out, it's her tuning in to a frequency of the world that simply isn't available to you. And this is the part most explanations don't stay with long enough to be useful. They identify the tool, hearing, smell, and then move on. But the more interesting question is, what does it feel like to be her in that moment? What is the experience of receiving that much information from a single fixed point? Feline ethologists who study attention states in domestic cats have noted that the sustained focused stare, body still, breath slow, external movement minimal, is a state of deep, concentrated engagement. Not confusion, not malfunction, engagement. The kind of engagement that requires stillness because the processing happening underneath it is anything but still. There's something quietly humbling about that, if you let yourself sit in it. You're sharing a home with a creature who is, in her own unhurried way, continuously encountering a version of reality that you can only gesture toward from the outside. She's not withdrawn when she stares at the wall. She's not absent. She is, in those moments, probably more present than she is at almost any other point in her day. And there are, as it turns out, at least 3 distinct layers to what's driving that presence. 3 layers that build on each other in a way that the internet's quick answers never quite reach. The first layer is the one most people already suspect, but even that one goes deeper than you'd think. So let's step inside her world. Not to explain it away and not to flatten it into a list of biology facts, but to actually follow her in as far as we can go. Because once you understand what she's receiving in those moments of focused stillness, the second layer, the psychological one, starts to make a kind of sense that is, honestly, a little breathtaking. And the third layer, the one that connects all of this back to you specifically, is the one that changes what the wall stare actually means. Not just as a behavior, as a quiet daily truth about the bond between the two of you. Start with sound, because that's the layer closest to the surface, and even here, the depth is worth pausing on. A cat's hearing range extends, according to research on feline auditory biology, to frequencies of up to approximately 79,000 hertz. For context, the upper edge of healthy human hearing sits somewhere around 20,000 hertz. That gap isn't a minor upgrade. It's an entirely different register of the world. Inside your walls right now there are sounds. Ultrasonic frequencies produced by insects, the faint vibration of electrical wiring, pipes contracting with temperature changes, the scurrying movement of something small in a cavity you've never thought about. To you, the wall is silent. To your cat, it may be producing a continuous detailed acoustic signal that she's decoding in real time. And it isn't just what she hears, it's how she listens. Watch her ears during a wall stare. They aren't fixed forward like a statue. They move, subtly, independently, rotating in small, precise increments. One angling slightly left while the other tilts forward. Each adjustment narrowing the acoustic field, triangulating a signal with a kind of biological precision that no technology in your home can match. Feline behaviorists have observed that this ear rotation behavior during focused attention states is active and purposeful, not reflexive. She isn't passively receiving sound. She is hunting it, pulling it into focus the way you'd slowly turn a dial to tune a signal from static into something clear. The wall isn't a dead surface to her, it's a transmission. Then there's scent, and this is the layer that most wall stare explanations skip entirely, which is a significant omission. A cat's olfactory system is estimated to be roughly 14 times more sensitive than a human's, with a scent processing organ, the Jacobson's organ or vomeronasal organ, that humans simply don't possess in any meaningful functional form. Scent molecules move through materials. They seep through plaster, travel along temperature gradients in the air, accumulate in the corners of rooms over months and years. Your cat may be reading a scent history embedded in that wall. Traces of another animal, a previous resident, a seasonal shift in what's living in the building's structure. A story written in molecules that is completely invisible to you and entirely legible to her. You might have noticed during a particularly focused wall stare that your cat's mouth opened slightly, just a fraction, almost imperceptible. This is called the phlegmon response, and it's her drawing scent molecules directly toward that vomeronasal organ, deepening the read. It looks a little blank, a little vacant. From the outside, it could easily be mistaken for spaciness. It isn't. It's the feline equivalent of leaning in closer to read something written in very small print. She has found something worth investigating, and she is investigating it with every tool available to her. The slightly open mouth, the stillness, the fixed gaze. These aren't separate things. They're a single coordinated act of deep attention. Now add vision, and this is where the picture gets genuinely surprising. The assumption is that cats see worse than humans in some ways. Less color range, softer detail at middle distances. That's partly true. But in other dimensions, their visual processing is operating on a completely different level. Research on feline visual perception suggests that cats process visual flicker at a significantly higher rate than humans. What this means in practice is that faint, fast-moving variations in light, a barely perceptible shadow shift from a car passing outside, a micro-flicker from a poorly sealed window, reflections too subtle for the human eye to register as movement, may appear to your cat as genuine trackable motion. The blank wall, caught in just the right light, may not be blank at all. It may be moving. Put all three layers together, the sound, the scent, the light, and something starts to emerge. What your cat is doing during a wall stare isn't one thing, it's a convergence. 3 sensory systems, each operating at a level of sensitivity you don't share, all pointed at the same fixed location at the same time, all feeding information into a nervous system that is, in those quiet seconds, working with extraordinary intensity. Feline behaviorists have noted that this kind of fixed focus posture, upright body, forward whiskers, measured breath, minimal external movement, mirrors the pre-stalk attention state observed in cats during predatory focus. She is not zoned out. She is, by every physiological measure, completely and precisely in. This is the moment worth holding for a second. The next time you sit across the room and watch your cat stare at the wall, you're not watching confusion or boredom or some small neurological hiccup. You're watching a creature whose entire sensory architecture, built over millions of years of evolutionary refinement, is engaged with a point in space that is, to her, genuinely rich with information. That's not unsettling. It's extraordinary, and it reframes the experience completely. She isn't somewhere else. She's more here, more precisely located in the physical reality of that room than almost anything else in it, including probably you. But here's what the sensory explanation still doesn't answer, and this is the layer that matters most to the question underneath all of this. Understanding what she's receiving tells you what she's doing. It doesn't tell you what it means that she's doing it here, in your home, in your room, with you nearby. Because sensory processing alone doesn't explain the quality of that stillness. It doesn't explain the feeling, the one you've probably had without quite knowing how to name it, that she isn't just focused on the wall. She's focused on the wall while being, somewhere in the background of that focus, aware of you. And that awareness, it turns out, is not a small thing. There's something feline ethologists have observed that doesn't get nearly enough attention in casual conversations about cat behavior. A cat who is genuinely stressed, not mildly alert but actually distressed, does not typically enter a state of sustained, upright, forward-focused stillness. She crouches, she tucks, she makes herself smaller, presses into corners, shows dilated pupils and flattened ears, and a tail wrapped tight against her body. Fear in a cat looks like compression. It looks like withdrawal. What you're watching during a calm wall stare looks nothing like that. The upright posture, the easy breath, the quietly rotating ears. These are not the signals of an anxious animal. They are, if you know how to read them, the signals of a cat who feels safe enough to be curious. That distinction matters more than it might initially seem. Curiosity in cats is not a default state. It's a state that requires a foundation, a felt sense of security in the environment, an absence of threat, a body that isn't preoccupied with managing fear. Feline behaviorists describe this as the difference between a cat who is simply surviving her environment and one who is genuinely inhabiting it. A cat who stares at walls with calm, focused attention is a cat whose nervous system has made a quiet determination: this place is safe, this space is known. I can afford to pay attention to something interesting because I am not spending my energy watching for danger. That's not a small psychological threshold to cross. For a cat, that's everything. This connects to something that cat behavior researchers sometimes call environmental mapping, the continuous, low-level process by which a cat builds and maintains an intimate, detailed knowledge of her territory. And territory for a cat is not primarily about possession or aggression. It's about knowing. A cat's sense of security is rooted in familiarity, in understanding the rhythms, sounds, scents, and textures of her space well enough that anomalies register immediately and nothing catches her completely off guard. The wall stare, understood through this lens, is part of an ongoing quiet practice. She's not confused by her environment. She is tending to it, the way you might slowly reread a chapter you know well, because something in it has shifted slightly. Now, and this is important, because it speaks to something you may have quietly worried about. There are moments when repetitive, disoriented-looking wall staring is worth a gentle second look. In senior cats especially, behavioral changes that include staring at walls paired with signs like disorientation, increased nighttime vocalization, or obvious confusion about familiar spaces can sometimes be associated with age-related cognitive changes. If you have an older cat and the staring looks less like focused attention and more like lostness, if she seems not to know where she is, a quiet conversation with your vet is always worth having. Not with alarm, just with care. Because knowing the difference between a cat who is deeply engaged and a cat who needs support is exactly the kind of attentiveness that makes you the person she deserves. But for the vast majority of wall stares you will ever witness, the calm, upright, quietly intense ones, what you're watching is something far more interesting than a health concern. You're watching a cat communicate through the language she uses most fluently: stillness. This is worth sitting with because it runs counter to how most people read feline behavior. We tend to look for movement as the signal: the tail flick, the chirp, the head bump. But cats are, at their core, masters of communicating through the absence of movement. The slow blink is stillness. The loaf, that tucked, rounded resting posture, is stillness. And a focused wall stare is stillness too. In each case, what the stillness is saying is roughly the same thing. I am at ease. I am present. I am not braced against anything. Here's the part that tends to land quietly but stay for a long time. You may have occasionally felt, watching your cat stare at the wall, a small and slightly irrational worry that she's somewhere you can't follow. That her attention has gone to a place that excludes you entirely. That in those moments, you don't exist to her. Research on feline attention and social behavior gently pushes back on that feeling. Feline behaviorists have observed that cats maintain a background awareness of their trusted person even during states of deep, focused attention. That the presence of their chosen human registers continuously, not just when they're actively seeking interaction. Her focus on the wall doesn't erase her awareness of you. It simply coexists with it, The way you can be absorbed in something and still feel the warmth of someone you love sitting nearby. Attachment research on domestic cats, including work exploring how cats form selective individual bonds with specific people, suggests that where a cat chooses to be is rarely accidental. Cats don't remain in spaces that feel threatening or uncomfortable. They don't settle into sustained, relaxed attention states in places or with people they don't trust. So when your cat positions herself in your room, in your presence, and enters that state of quiet, absorbed focus, that location is not incidental. She is not there to spite you. She is there, at least in part, because of you, because your presence is woven into what makes that space feel safe enough to inhabit fully. You are part of the architecture of her calm. So here is what the wall stare actually is, when you hold all of it at once. It is your cat, navigating a sensory world of extraordinary depth and detail, in a psychological state that only becomes available to her when she feels genuinely secure, in a space she has chosen and mapped and returned to, a space where you are present. She is not ignoring you. She is not lost. She is not broken or bored or somewhere you'll never reach. She is doing something that for a cat requires everything to be right, and in the quiet of that focused stillness, ears tilted, breath easy, eyes fixed on a frequency of the world you'll never hear, she is telling you something, not loudly. She would never do it loudly, but she is telling you in the only language she has ever needed. Here is safe, here I can simply be. And the reason here feels that way, at least in part, is you.